I need to figure out where we left off in assignment 9.1. Did we already talk about
e-waste? Oh wait,
finished
we did
e-waste.
Never mind. No,
yeah,
we did not.
and then we talked about the Earth's crust and the composition of the crust.
Yeah.
And then we talked about the processes, like the tectonic plates. Talk about tectonic plates.
Yeah, that's why it's not uniform,
Like
it's not distributed evenly.
And then we talked about sedimentary rock.
Yeah.
Used to be sediment, liquefies into rock. You talk about weathering, 3 types of weathering.
Yeah.
Yeah. Talk about evaporation.
And yeah, it breaks the rock, right?
No,
Oh, it's freezing.
You were thinking about freeze-thaw cycling?
Oh yeah.
So we're in study goal number 12 and section B of that study goal. Remember that the question that we're taking notes on is how the elements of the Earth's crust get mixed up. We've talked about how water carries material and that sediments, that makes sedimentary rock. We've talked about tectonic plates, uplift, metamorphosis. We talked about weathering from wind-blown sand or water or expanding freeze-thaw cycles. Next, something that shuffles the deck is when water evaporates and leaves salts behind. You're looking at a salt flat.
Oh yeah.
They're a really good place to race cars because they're perfectly flat, because it used to be a lake. Or actually, it used to be a sea. Anybody know the difference between lakes and seas?
There's no outlet into the sea. So it builds up salts and evaporates.
So lakes are flushed and the water exits through the exit of the lake. But inland seas, oceans, these all trap water, has no place left to run, so it can only evaporate, meaning that all the things that were dissolved will settle there. On our planet, there's a whole bunch of elements that are only aggregated by evaporation of water. That's why all salts are sea salt, either a current sea or a historic sea that's already dried up. And then we talk about limestone towers.
No.
These are the last part of 12B.
We got to biological process.
Cool. Cool. So, biological processes are when metabolism connects chemicals. So the classics are the silica found in sand that used to be diatomaceous algae. They take silica from water and assemble it into this hexagonal shape. That's how we get all the silica for silicon microchips and stuff. And this rock, limestone, which is shaped in these really cool towers that look really irregular and eerie and weird. They started a really long time ago as calcium ions in water and carbonate ions in water. A biological process made them into calcium carbonate, like seashells and coral skeletons. Those seashells and coral skeletons got smashed together by the teeth of a parrotfish or a hurricane tumbling them. And the little pieces of calcium carbonate are a really special type of sand. How many of you have seen that light white sand in the tropics? It's like crumbly and it's coarse.
So
and it's really light.
It's really like
bigger grain. Yeah. So that's either shell pieces or coral pieces.
Yeah, because it's really like when you get it, it's like big piece. It doesn't feel like dust. It feels more like rocks, kind of, I guess.
Yeah, like the size. Yeah. So
bigger.
this dusty stuff is actually little pieces of rock. And that big stuff that's the size that you would think of as a rock is actually little pieces of skeleton from seashells and corals. So like a 5-gallon bucket of puka sand, you can like lift it and walk around with it and it's not too bad. But a 5-gallon bucket of our beach sand is really heavy. Imagine.
Because more of it fits in there, right?
Yeah.
Because it's smaller.
Yeah. Imagine calcium carbonate ions in the water become calcium carbonate in a living thing that's broken up into little pieces of calcium carbonate shell. That will lithify into a sedimentary calcium carbonate rock. Watch me. It migrates, tectonic process, metamorphosis, heat and pressure, make it into limestone. That tectonic process continues, uplift comes up to the surface. All the other stuff erodes out of the way. Limestone is pretty tough, but limestone is sensitive to pH. So rainfall weathers it into these wacky shapes.
So was that originally just, what would it look like originally?
Coral. And pretty soon, this is going to dissolve into calcium and carbonate ions. The carbonate will go to the air, the calcium will go to the ocean.
And that'll be gone.
And then more carbon will dissolve into water and make carbonate ions, and you'll start building it again.
So the rain, pretty much the pH of the rain ate out that rock.
Yep, yep. Thank you, Charlie.
Well.
Charlie's on fire. This is why you sit in the back. This rock has basically been every one of the processes we've talked about. Think about it. The story of this rock is chemical weathering, because of the acid rain, erosion, movement by water, deposition, sediment, biological, metamorphosis. Every word that we've used so far is in the history, in the cycle of this rock. I think that's kind of neat. There's one thing that wasn't in your book in study goal number 12. It's this one, placer deposits.
Placer?
Mm-hmm. Some people pronounce it placer. I really don't know which one is correct. I just want to pick placer right now so we can just move on. But you could put a little asterisk there. I might be saying it wrong. Watch me. Please look up. You got your mountain range. You got your angry cloud making the rainfall. Little pieces of that mountain range will be weathered and eroded by the moving water. And when the water slows down, stuff will settle. We've talked about this before in this class a number of times. But now, I'd like to think about which things settle. Remember I told you that fast-moving water can carry boulders or school buses or houses or really heavy stuff like your mom?
Like we just saw.
What's that?
Like the mudslides.
Yeah, unfortunately we have seen things like that. I should probably kick back on that joke. As that water slows down, some stuff will start to settle. The question is, which stuff settles first?
Denser.
The heavier stuff.
The lighter stuff, actually.
Is it the lighter, the heavier, the denser, the least dense? Which stuff will settle first?
Wouldn't it be the heaviest? Because it's
Isn't
like
the
gold,
heaviest
right?
tube just
It's
fastest?
like it's always found at the bottom.
It is the heaviest. Think about it, if those things weigh about the same, a certain flow will keep them moving, and then when the water slows down, they're both going to drop. So placer deposits are geologic deposits. They're material that is sorted by mass. It's not by size, and it's not really by density. There is a little bias toward density because of drag. But you can imagine something really, really big could still keep moving if it's really light. Like if you had a gigantic trash bag of feathers, that's large, but that's going to float pretty much almost forever. No matter how slow the water's moving, that's not going to settle.
Don't large things have more momentum when they're moving through water?
Yeah, there is, like I said, a little bias for density, but not very much. Placer deposits are primarily sorted by mass. So think about it. If this was a rock like sandstone, and this was a fishing weight of lead, they would probably fall at about the same point. If the water's moving fast enough to keep that lead in suspension, it's probably moving fast enough to keep that rock in suspension. And so even though those things have a very different density, they usually settle at about the same point because their mass is the same.
I don't think we wrote sort by density then.
I meant to say sort by mass. I'm glad you caught that. 3 periods today. Copied the wrong thing and could put that in their notes. Okay, so those are placer deposits, where water's speed sorts things out by mass. We'll come back later to do some gold mining in this example. Next, I'm going to go to 14, please. If you had to choose a country on the map to build an economy, you should probably choose the United States. It's too bad Caden's not here. He'd probably like to hear me say this.
Maybe
But
Is it because we have our own deposits or resources
in
here?
terms of just total geology, we've got probably the best country for that. Maybe Russia, maybe China. Our country's really, really big. And our land mass, if you look at that, that's really diverse. We've got some really old tectonic plates, some really new tectonic plate. We've got grasslands, forest, fish, it's got everything you want. But there are a few ingredients that we really need in our economy that our country doesn't have. Those are called strategic metals. Economically important that you don't have internally. There's all these little countries. Don't you ever wonder, like, how does that little country have such a good economy?
Because they have metal.
Because they have oil or something.
They got something that other people need.
Just like Bahrain or something.
Well, exactly that. Bahrain is a teeny little place, but you know, they've got access to all the shipping and transport of petroleum, so they're rich.
They're so
New Caledonia is this teeny little island off the coast of Australia, and they're like one of the wealthiest countries in the southern hemisphere.
Never even heard of it.
Because they're like, yeah, right, like nobody's ever heard of it, you're not alone in that. Because they're like the world's number 2 nickel supplier. And you need nickel for all kinds of batteries. And so as long as the world does electronics, New Caledonia's stoked.
Is that where like Qatar gets all its money?
Where what?
Qatar gets all its money?
Qatar gets all their money from petroleum stuff too.
Yeah.
But like Kyrgyzstan, like they have one of the least developed economies on earth. They have like very simplified, gross economy, and they're still super, super, super successful as a country because they are the world's number 1 exporter of mercury. Jamaica is surrounded by all these really poor Caribbean nations.
Oh, weird.
Think of how close they are to Haiti, the poorest nation in the West. You can almost swim from Haiti to Jamaica. And people try, unfortunately. And Jamaica is one of the wealthiest nations in the Caribbean. And why would they be? Like, reggae is not a valuable export. They have bad weed.
Oh.
bobsleds.
Right?
Cool runnings.
That's not shown in the
They've got some tourism.
Sandals.
They've got some tourism, but the rest of the world has better tourism.
Oh, they have some
Eco-tourism.
10
They have number 1 thing that the United States needs.
bauxite.
Bauxite, the ore of aluminum. Take a minute and write those down. Those are the 6 that the United States needs right now. See, now I don't want you to have your phone out. I want you to put your phone in your backpack right now, please.
They're not showing cool runnings in schools anymore, and they're banning it. They're banning the movie from schools because it's
Really?
expensive.
Why?
I don't know, apparently
Cool
it's
Runnings?
expensive or something.
But it's so good.
I don't see how it's expensive.
expensive?
It's a true story.
It's by Disney.
Yeah, what are they banning?
Wait, they banned it in schools? Really?
Yeah, they're making us for this.
Oh my god.
It's too sensitive.
Open really?
Can't handle it, beta. And we got
Now, those 6 strategic metals, those are the top 6 things that our economy needs, and we don't have them.
Don't have them anyway.
Other countries do.
We don't have any aluminum ore.
So we don't really have a significant amount of aluminum ore. It's the #1 thing that we import it's the #1 metal that we import. And think about it, our construction industry, our aerospace industry, our aviation industry, our trains, our construction, our consumer goods, they all rely on something that our country doesn't have. So we gotta go be friends with Jamaica, we gotta go be friends with Guinea, a teeny little country in South America. Or is that Guyana?
No, it's gone. Guinea's is Africa.
Ivory Coast?
Yeah.
Okay, so Guyana, and there's another, I forget which one's which, doesn't matter. Australia. The point is, we often have some really strange relationships. We give like beneficial corn pricing to one country and not 100 other countries because, you know, we need them to hook us up with the aluminum price. But there's a very interesting change in our economy. You all know that the United States became a global producer of cars in the early 20th century, and that was a big deal for our economy. And then like appliances and stuff, that was a big deal.
Where do we get our vibranium?
I don't know. But do you all know what is the thing that we all know will guide the economy for your generation? Which consumer product is the future right now?
Phones.
Yeah, electronics. Consumer electronics, you all understand that, right?
Yeah.
Like this and like all those.
Anata.
Yeah, exactly. And those don't have a single strategic metal. Those have a category. Vocab term you have to know, they're called rare earth metals or rare earth elements.
What are those rare earth metals?
You know what that is out there?
I'll show you.
Such as?
Like crazy stuff that's in our phones.
Is that just stuff that makes electronics, pretty much?
It doesn't just make electronics. It makes electronics fancy. You all know this, right? You can make a rechargeable battery. But if somebody makes a battery that charges 5 minutes faster, hotcakes. You can all make a cell phone out of whatever you want, but if you can make a cell phone that's a little bit lighter, people are like, whoa, yeah, lighter. Or if you make glass that's a little bit harder, you'll pay an extra $300 for that. So there's all this crazy chemistry. People are like, I wonder what happens if I mix in a little bit of europium or terbium or go ahead. Come on, you know you want to.
Vibranium.
Okay, so if you can find these rare ingredients that give you a competitive edge, booyah, you're going to be the guy that makes the 2019 patented cell phone.
And then you're rich.
Well,
And then you're rich.
Isn't the bottom panel like the
Yeah, so I'm not talking the theoretical ones.
that's all like stuff that's made in the lab.
Right, I'm talking about these, the rare.
Yeah.
Most of these are pretty hard to find.
Alright.
And there's a few up here that are pretty rare too.
What are our phones? What metals are our phones made of right now?
Well, it's like a little bit of all kinds. Remember, didn't somebody ask this question in our 250 different metals in a cell phone?
That's crazy.
It's not a lot.
There's only
It's like
50 elements.
I know, right?
Is there?
And so they're like, well, metal can be an amalgam or an alloy. So it's a blend, right? So those fancy mixes, man, that's the future of the world's economy. You understand that, right? Like if Turkey can figure out how to make a battery that lasts 2 days instead of 1 day, can you imagine what that would do? Like every cell phone maker, all those electric cars, all of like the widgets and whatchamacallits that you have to recharge around your house. Turkey would be rich if they found that one magic ingredient. They're not gonna.
Production?
When the United States talks about China, we usually complain about like steel exports most recently. We used to complain about how much debt. Now there's been another topic, which is how many patents they either copy or gain the rights to. Well, I feel that this slide is the real question that we should keep track of. The real reason that so many people are worried about China.
There's no flood.
Dang it! I wanted to put a Sharpie on there so bad. Okay.
Jalen, you're receiving.
Bro, I feel you. Rare earth metals and rare earth elements are going to be the strategic ingredients of the electronics age, and it looks like China has a lock on it. The United States used to produce more than the rest of the world combined. We have these mines in the eastern Sierra and more mines down in Barstow Desert area that have huge volumes of these really rare ingredients. You know, you got to dig up a ton of dirt for a few little grams of dust that aren't really immediately valuable. So we kind of let those mines go away. We passed clean air laws and clean water laws. And a lot of the mines, if they're not really worth it with all these new regulations, we shut them down. Remember all that red we had on the board yesterday?
We had all red.
Yeah, exactly. So our new air protection, water protection made us healthier, happier, cleaner humans. Our diet is better, our life expectancy is better, cancer rates are down. It's a good call. Flip side, it just wasn't worth keeping a lot of those crap-ass mines. But you know, somebody else doesn't have.
China doesn't care about health.
Well, I'm sure that they do, but their economy's at a different point. Their economy's in a different place.
Well, we did this like 40, 50 years ago.
Right, and so China will eventually regulate the heck out of their mining too. But they're not doing that right now, and at this time, right. And so if they can keep hoarding all the rare earth elements, they've got all the things they need for the electronics of the future. They're not really crushing the world economy as much as people say, but they're definitely setting themselves up to do some power moves later. I find this to be really interesting.
So we should have done this when we were a developing country.
Yeah.
Didn't we kind of do it?
You know, we don't really do a lot of international aid, so we don't have a lot of relationships with, I mean, not proportional to our wealth. We don't do as much international aid as other countries. So we do a lot in total, but as a percentage, it's chump change of our economy. Right?
Yeah.
China, on the other hand, they're like the biggest donor to the entire African continent. So you know what? They're building a whole bunch of factories and harbors, and they're setting up all of their connections. So when they want to start outsourcing electronics production,
they're building. I was surfing in, you know where Trincones is in Mexico? And they're building a Chinese port.
I know.
And all the locals are.
I know. So China's definitely setting up to like do that dominant outsourcing, patenting.
Taking over the world.
I mean, and they're just being smarter about it than we were. You know, it's like they did everything that we did, but just better. In my opinion, I'm not really, I'm
We
not an
also
expert.
didn't really have like, the technology to do that.
Yeah, we didn't, they learned probably from our
1700s.
mistakes. Too.
I think we had a lot of that age's cutting edge technology. We just didn't stay on top of it. Okay. I got to get to study goal number 16. That's what I was hoping to do today. Just so you know, period number 3, which is really fast, their started class today right here. So that's how far back period 4 is.
We got 10 kids here.
I know, so we can catch up a good
And we
bit.
don't have Walker.
Right? We can catch up a good bit.
That's almost everything.
Look,
Wait, that's actually wrong.
here's where we're going. Here's where we're going. We're going to define 5 types of mining, 3 types of processing ore, and along the way, we're going to answer the last part of 16, which is today's warm-up.
That I did.
So we're going to do all of that today and Monday.
Okay.
First, some general impacts of mining. If you wanted to number these, it's easier to talk about them. Number 1, the massive loss of habitat should be obvious. You're moving dirt around.
Wait, do you want us to write these?
I told you in number 16 to leave like a page in your notes.
Yeah,
This
yeah,
is
there's
why.
a whole page.
Yeah.
But we already know all these, so.
The most obvious upfront impact of mining is the habitat loss. I believe this is the number 2 habitat disruption on Earth, second only to food production. Second problem with mining is all the cookie crumbs. Those are called spoils. Or the stuff left over after you clean off the chocolate chip. Those are called tailings. Mining is one of the primary sources of particulate and sediment pollution on Earth. So water pollution and air pollution comes from mining.
Particulate and runoff.
Particulate and sediment. So particulates in the air, sediment in the water. Whoa, 2 5s just came in together. That's weird. Problem number 3, I've said this 100 million times, I gotta say it again. Anything you take out from underground hasn't seen oxygen in a long time.
No, oxidized.
So almost any metal and a lot of other ingredients will oxidize. They interact with oxygen. It's like letting them out of geology prison. They've been waiting to do this and they're going to go get it.
So they're taking oxygen and
That's right. And they're reacting with it. Once you have an oxide, you mix in water and you get acids. So all mines, you got to worry about acids in the runoff or acids to the groundwater. That's why new vocab bullet number 4, impoundment is so important. That means to contain contaminated water. And bullet number 5, all these problems are getting bigger. Mines are getting bigger. You know, just like parking lots are getting bigger and Walmarts are getting bigger and cars are getting bigger.
Freeways.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, mining is just getting bigger. So back in the day, you used to think of small mines. Now, all those are bigger. Anything that you've ever seen about mining is probably outdated and been replaced by just a bigger version of that. So you'll see that trend as I go. Are we good with all this?
What was impoundment again?
What?
What was impoundment again?
Impoundment is to contain contaminated water. People make what are called impoundment dams, which make like a reservoir of dirty water. Because everything you dig out of the ground is
But it
sketchy
doesn't
for water quality.
It doesn't let it go in the environment, but it's still not getting rid of though, right?
Right, so usually you still have it all, and so now the question is
like
it
the
going
smokestack.
to like evaporate and concentrate for other disposal, or at least it's not going in the groundwater?
Yeah, like you still have to worry about disposal.
True.
It's still there.
True. Okay, remember I told you 5 types of mining? This is number 1. It's called placer mining. Remember that placer deposits are settled by their weight. So now if you sort through that, the densest stuff would be gold. There's like a city near Tahoe called Placerville or Placerville. That's because of this type of mining, because this is basically gold mining.
They just take off layers of time.
Yeah, I mean, you're just picking through the sediment to find the densest stuff.
So this is exactly what gold mining is?
Yep.
Is that because gold is dense?
What?
Gold's dense.
Gold's heavy.
Yeah.
That's
So,
why
you know, it's like a fishing weight. A fishing weight this size is way heavier than an average pebble that size.
And they have to go all the way to like bedrock, right?
Well,
They dig pretty
no,
far for
usually
it?
you just mine where there was water.
Oh yeah, because it settles.
Right.
Because it comes down like
sorted by mass.
Mhm.
So if you find the littlest pieces among all the rocks, those will usually be the same mass but at higher density. It's gold.
Do you like sift for like anything else, like any other metals, like you sift for gold?
Technically, you can placer mine lead. It's not very valuable, but it's possible.
Because it's heavier than.
And there's placer mining for precious stones, some of which are actually pretty dense.
That's like tropics, right? They do that. They find like crystals. and
Yep.
stuff.
Now, I do want to talk about a couple of things about placer mining that I need to highlight for your notes. Number 1, it's associated with water. You're mining riverbeds, stream banks, or places where you had a river.
Do you think if you were to do like the creeks here, would you find anything valuable?
Yeah. You all know where Red Rock is? Red Rocks?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Like on Paradise Road?
Yeah.
If you walk up the creek like 2 miles, you get to a sign that says don't drink this water or don't eat fish out of this water. That's because there's a bunch of mercury pollution there because they used to mine gold there and they used the mercury to separate the gold.
Yeah. So is it dangerous to drink water at Red Rock? Or?
Probably, but it's definitely dangerous at that spot because that's before the other feathers come in and dilute the mercury levels. Okay, next, you have to know about placer mining. That global warming has opened up a lot of new places because a lot of the permafrost tundra used to be rivers, then it froze and you couldn't mine it. Now that it's thawed, you can. So I believe Canada is the world's largest gold exporter right now.
Like the Yukon, all that area up there.
Yeah, all these places that used to be frozen, now that they've thawed, you can get at all these ancient riverbeds.
So you think the valuability of like the gold is gonna become more valuable this time?
That's hard to believe because there's a lot of gold out there.
Well, it's going to become more common because the ice is thawing.
They've just cornered the market. I don't think that they've really inflated the market too much. I mean, I understand your points of playing band, but there's, I think that they're just one of the main producers at the moment. And the last thing, or the third thing I want you to know is, this is like the gateway drug to deforestation in the tropics. Do y'all know that term?
Mm-hmm.
Like you're not supposed to like sniff glue because then you're gonna start freebasing heroin or whatever. The gateway concept.
Can you actually sniff glue?
I
You're just
don't
making
know.
that up. You're just making that up. I was like, wait.
Right.
You can use like Sharpies, I guess.
Dude, I did that in my class with like one of those big.
Did I ban them at the junior high or something like that?
No, it like smelled really good. So one of my students was like, "Yo, what's that smell?" And I was like, "It's my Sharpie. I love that smell." And she's like, "I hate that smell." I was like, I love that smell." And so I like huffed it for a second, and I was just trying to make a joke about how I like the smell of Sharpies. And then I looked up and I went to talk and I was like, whoa. I had to sit down and I got really loopy for a second. That was gnarly.
I got so annoyed.
I mean, I think I killed a bunch of brain cells. I had like a headache afterward. That's not good. That's not good. Look, let's talk about this deforestation thing for a minute, because this is one of those cool details about my class that the whole world doesn't understand, but you guys will know something. You're going to always remember this.
It's a gateway to deforestation.
Everybody thinks that deforestation is because of lumber.
Mine.
You've probably heard some crazy number about like 7 football fields per second, or 3 square miles a day, or like 2 Delawares a year, or whatever. Some statistic about tropical deforestation. And the visual they always show you is like lumber trucks up in Mendocino or something.
Isn't that awesome?
Here's the thing. Tropical rainforest is sketchy. Like humans are not good in the tropical rainforest. Everything is sharp. There's like the flies that lay larvae in you, and like the catfish that swim up your urethra, and like
Toothpick fish.
yeah, there's like all the spines that are all poisonous, and the plants that have like the toxic fruit, and like the frogs can kill
toads.
you.
Don't lick the cane toads either.
Right. So like everything in the tropics is out to kill you.
Poison dart frogs.
See, you got like all the pit vipers and the jaguars that will kill you in your sleep.
The mosquitoes.
The cannibals.
Bigfoot.
The Indians, or the native people. Blow dirty. It's like Ace Ventura.
And look, there are a lot of comedic memes and themes about this, but the real deal is that the tropics are really dangerous. Like the average life expectancy of natives in the Amazon basin is something like 35 to 38 depending on their tribe.
It's
Like that is really low life expectancy. Because it's a dangerous environment. You might not be alive tomorrow. So it's really not worth it. Kind of gotta put yourself on the way, bro. It's really not worth it to go hunting through 5 acres of wild forest to find the one valuable tree. You know that it's a diverse forest. Most of that stuff's not even good for firewood. You gotta cut all this stuff out of the way to find one really expensive hardwood or something. We don't really go into virgin forest for lumber. Maybe you know that for a long time there, we grew most of the cheap cattle by slash and burn grazing. But again, it's just not worth it. Cattle's not a very expensive, valuable commodity. We used to grow all the soy in the swamplands at the south of the Amazon basin. And again, that's like $1.20 a bushel. It's not worth it. The one thing that's worth it is the gold. If you can go to the middle of nowhere and whip up like $1 million of gold, you know how dense gold is. You can fit $1 million of gold in like a single barrel. That's worth moving that barrel for $1 million. It's not worth moving a log out of 5 acres with cutting roads and stuff, but for $1 million, the barrel is worth moving.
Probably fit that in your backpack.
And usually it's walked out in small bags like that. 1/2 of the world gold supply comes from illegal or unpermitted sources. That's a big market. That is gazillions of dollars. And what does that take? Not much. You get a couple of heavies with some like big guns and chainsaws and like maybe a couple of machines. You can cut some road.
There's
Shoot whatever you gotta shoot.
They use like wood stuff to like extract it too. It's really
You know,
not
you build
even,
like
like
a
good
really,
technology really.
No, it's very low tech.
It's like in the middle
super
of
low
the
tech.
jungle.
A compressor and like a couple of hoses, and you're there.
Yeah.
You may be surprised to know that this is the majority of the human slave labor trade.
Gold or minerals?
Mining.
Mine.
Illegal mining is the #1 human slave labor market.
Does Africa still have like a lot of gold?
Yeah.
Africa has gold, Southeast Asia has gold, and the Amazon Basin, Ecuador, Bolivia, Peru have gold.
So
Ghana,
basically,
Africa or
all,
something?
The tropics.
all like human slave trade takes place.
Yeah, pretty much. That's exactly it. And so, of course, there's like the sex trade.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
is a big part of the slave
Yeah.
trade. But for working, you know, for like busting your knuckles, that's pretty much all for mining. Hello.
Can I have Will Robin?
Yeah.
I don't know, well, Robin, you want to go see what this lady needs or not?
Sure.
Okay.
Or just
He's all yours.
Mine's not here.
Artist is
So,
I feel like every time I get called out, like someone comes in the classroom.
what's your favorite part of
Philosopher of the year.
See, I never did basketball. I got points.
baby
Spirit
face
of
in
the
the
Sick
mud.
dudes.
The thing that we have to shift in our understanding of deforestation is that it's not for one reason. It gets worse for a series of reasons. So you cut the road and make a clearing and kill the poisonous stuff because of the mining. Now that it's safe, when the miners are gone, the people come in to hunt all the parrots and the exotic fish for the pet trade. Now that that's added a little traffic to the road, now you can fit the big truck to pull out the lumber. And now that you've cut down some stuff to pull out the lumber, now you can slash and burn to grow some soy. When the soy doesn't grow, now you bring in the cows. And each of those kind of further develops the forest. Yeah,
So it's pretty much like a mining or like a resource, like a legal resource food chain.
it is, exactly. And it's important to point out that most of that is not legal. It's not permitted. Especially the mining. Dude, if you're in the middle of the jungle and you're doing something illegal, you'll probably get away with it.
Who's gonna get there? Yeah.
Like if some cop shows up, like underpaid in a uniform they had to buy, they're gonna like throw their keys at you.
Or you could just run away.
You're there to earn like $1 million. You have like land air missiles and like flamethrowers
You just,
and like fully automatic
You just-
protection.
you could just kill them.
And that
No
really
one would-
happens.
No one would do anything because who's gonna find them?
This is like one of the dirty little secrets about the global environmental problems that we really forget to see because we're not out there. So, placer mining used to be small scale. You take all the big rocks, look for the dense ones, those are the gold. All the medium rocks, look for the dense ones, those are gold. So there's 2 steps in gold panning. Sort everything by size first, and then you know that the densest will stay in the middle while all the light stuff spins off, and that's the gold. That's how panning works.
Since the Amazon rainforest, or like the rainforest, is so like loosely regulated, could it like be commons of like people and like you could get away
Sure.
with like anything?
Sure, and that's kind of the way that most thoughtful people think about it. It's not that anybody's okay with ruining the forest,
Yeah.
but you know, it's like if you were there and you see the gold and there's like no one around and you're like, well, I heard there's been a lot of mining happening, might as well be me.
Mm-hmm.
This is called small scale, this is industrial scale. Remember, we're just looking through riverbeds and stream beds. Even if there's no river anymore, but there used to be, like in the tundra.
They still use dredges.
Yeah. And remember that it's called tropical rainforest, so there's a lot of rivers and a lot of stream beds.
A lot of
So
rain.
pretty
A lot of
much
rain.
anywhere you've got this much rain, you've got some deposits.
So, how does like the water carry gold from like the source?
Well, water carries all things.
Yeah.
And water doesn't know that it's gold or not. Water just drops it based on its weight. So what's unique is, if you can sort by density, the river's already sorted by weight. Something really light will never settle down, even if it's big. It's not the size or density that the river cares about, it's the weight, right? So like a light piece of cork, that'll just keep floating all the way, see you later, get out to the ocean.
I'm almost at the top of the mountain.
The thing about gold is that it'll be mixed in with other eroded rock, but it'll be much denser. So when there's like a pebble bed, at the bottom of that pebble bed, there will be a fine gold bed.
So will it just like settle in like the eddies of the river?
Right? Edge of the river where it slows
How
down.
how is gold naturally created, and then is it like little flakes or nuggets or?
It's like
It's a metal that's molten into rock, so usually it's in veins
Yeah.
that fragment through erosion. So if you can find it in a rock and chip it out of the rock, that's usually super valuable.
That happens.
Because you
That's really
follow a
rare.
vein. But that's pretty rare. There is a famous gold mine at the top of Tioga Pass in Yosemite, and that's like a really famous mine. Super cool, you can go up there. I think you might visit there.
what
But
were
that
they-
was like following
Were they
two
finding
Is it
big
like in-
nuggets?
They did back in the day, they're all gone now.
Is it nuggets or is it like flakes or anything? It's just however it breaks off.
Yeah, it's a molten metal mixed in with rock, so it would be whatever,
So
it cools down.
gold's a
first.
volcanic
Cools down.
element? Is like
Metamorphic. In metamorphic rock, you'll find veins of it.
Okay.
I need to get.
Please look up, the water pollution in the tropics is a big deal, a lot of sediment, and by the way, this was the last thing I forgot to tell you for your notes about placer mining. A lot of mercury gets into water through processing of gold. We're gonna do that one on Monday.
That's like in the one up here.
That's right, that's like Red Rock.
So it contaminates the water?
Yeah, this is the most mercury found in water.
Is that just like used
Yeah.
to be forest?
Yeah. So this is what I mean about the deforestation. Like once you've been picking through the riverbeds, like now, well, now it's worth going in. Like now that's worth building a city there, starting a logging camp.
Where's this at?
Peru, I believe.
Oof. Looks horrible.
Let's see what our time is like. Oh,
That was
Like
about
a
it.
minute.
2 minutes.
I gotta stop. Will you please press the stop streaming button?